right, everyone. Welcome to this coaching salon beyond the algorithm. For those of you that haven't met me yet, I'm Bridget Boudreau, and I'm a master coach. I've been doing this coaching gig for about 16 years now. And I do a few things, but in this context, I mentor coaches and just help coaches who are not about the glitz and glam, but just want to have a sustainable business that serves. I'm really focused on helping those folks succeed as defined by you. So that's me. And then I've asked Jana to come today. And Jana, I discovered on Threads. So I recently got on Threads just randomly. I personally don't really use it for business. I just like shout into the void over there, but somehow I ran into Jana, who I think is doing a great job actually marketing on Threads. And I asked her to come here because her expertise is so relevant to this question. So what I've been noticing out there is really for a few years now. And just to give you some context, in my other life, I've been always heavily involved in digital marketing. So in 2000, I became an email marketing manager. When that first became a thing, I worked for an early social network. I worked for a digital real estate startup. I've done Threads is Meta's new social network. Terry, just to answer your question really quickly. So anyway, I've been a big social media early adopter. So I love to follow this stuff. And I've been noticing a change in social over the last few years. And I'm sure many of you have too. I see nodding. Think about it. Think about, I don't even know how, was it 3, 4, 5, 6 years ago, people were checking in on Facebook. You were like taking pictures of your food. People were posting like 3, 4, 5, 6 times a day. That is not happening anymore. And then you see the rise of the algorithm, right? And so for us as service providers, like you basically have to pay to even get in front of a percentage of your own people that follow you. Then there's all the weird stuff that you have to do with your links. Go to my bio, do these 3 steps to get to me and do a thing. And we're doing all these weird gyrations. And so I've been getting pretty frustrated with that. So that's all the subtext and context to when I ran into Jana, and she was talking about doing things a little differently, and it really perked up my ears. So Jana, I'll kick it to you to just introduce yourself a bit and what you do and how that's relevant to this conversation today, where we're going to go beyond the algorithm.
Yeah, really, really good points. My wheels are spinning. So I'm Jana, everyone. Nice to see everyone. And I've been in online business supporting coaches now for about 8 years. It's been probably about a year that I've been saying 7, so I think it's time to start saying 8. And I really have 2 specializations. I spent a lot of time in the beginning of my business supporting coaches in the background with their content strategy, including content creation, really long form content, and then content repurposing. And I also specialized myself during that time in Pinterest marketing and teaching Pinterest marketing to coaches, which is a very little niche thing because there are a lot of different types of businesses that market on Pinterest, but coaches and service providers, it's like a different thing altogether when you're doing Pinterest for our type of business. So those are the 2 things that I have done really in my business. And about a year and a half ago or so, I started like kind of my official pivot, and I'm still teaching Pinterest marketing, but I've expanded into not just working on content strategy and content repurposing behind the scenes for coaches, which I did for a long time, like done for you work, but also teaching it as well. So I have 2 programs that I work with coaches now with: Pinterest with Purpose, which is my Pinterest program, and then High Leverage Content, which is my content strategy and content creation program that focuses on long form content. So yeah, that's a little bit about me. And I think, Bridget, like what you were saying, it reminds me a lot of like a conversation that I've been noticing myself having a lot recently, which is kind of related to what you've been saying, which is that I've been noticing, I feel like a lot of people in our space, coaches and service-based businesses in the online space, I feel like a lot of people have just gotten really tired Like we're just tired of all of what we think is required, for an online presence to, grow our client rosters, which, for us, when you say grow your client roster, it's not just about getting clients, it's also about what happens when you have clients. It's about the impact and the income, yes, like the consistent income, and also just like the legitimacy of having clients, therefore you can make an impact. So we want that, and we're looking around and we're trying to figure out, and all the time, like what it requires, what kind of visibility it requires to be able to consistently be filling a pipeline and consistently bringing new people onto our roster. And it's, there's a lot of different messages out there, and for a long time everybody was kind of like trying to do everything. And I think recently there's just been this like kind of movement going on kind of quietly, but now starting to come to the surface too, that like, no, like we don't have to do everything and be everywhere. Like this is like we're kind of tired of that. So yeah, so I've been like having that conversation a lot with people recently, and not to be negative, like there are ways to do it, but I think that's what I've been seeing a lot, and that's why I feel like this conversation starts to feel urgent, because a lot of people are really tired of what they think they need to do to be visible enough to be, always being able to sign new clients. So yeah.
Amen. Amen. And just to frame up this conversation a little bit, so Jana and I are just we'll chat until about half past, a little past half past, but feel free. I see comments coming in on the chat. And what I really want you to do is note your questions, anything this is bringing up for you, reflections, because then for the rest of the time together, we'll be opening it up for a discussion. And I love that we're just right into it, because Jana, you described exactly how I've been feeling. I am just tired. I'm tired of trying to create all this content while trying to run my business, show up for my clients, do other creative projects, do launches. Like to me,
Mhm.
it just constantly feels like spinning plates, and I'm deeply
Yeah.
tired of it. And then I think the other piece that goes along with that, that I hear from a lot of people and have experienced myself at different times, is not so there's spinning plates, and then just to totally mix the metaphor, but this is how it feels. It also feels like throwing spaghetti at the wall. It's like,
Yeah.
people are doing these elaborate kabukis to try to figure out what sticks, what appeals to people. How do I do this? And then let's add a third piece into the mix. There's this kind of, and I think a lot of us here, like we're not into the coach influencer culture, or there's so much hype in our industry and we're very allergic to that. But then I think there's almost been an overcorrection where I hear a lot of coaches that are very conscientious, but they're hesitant to market. They're hesitant to talk about their businesses and what they're doing in ways that are actually effective. And, for fear that it's cookie cutter, for fear that it's manipulative, all these. So I think we have this sort of swirl of elements happening that make it really hard to do business in this environment. So I don't know what do you think about that?
Yeah, I definitely agree. And I think a lot of the more granular problems that I hear people talking about, feeling like there's a lot of spinning plates and the guesswork that goes into creating content, which is really the spaghetti at the wall thing. I think a lot of that for me comes back to, I feel like I'm always helping people over those problems by starting with this important concept, which some of us know, but even when you know it, you forget it a lot, which is that we are not influencers. Like, as coaches, course creators, if that's what you're doing these days with your knowledge, consultants, strategists, anyone who works with clients, basically, our full-time job is generally working with clients. We're not influencers, where our full-time job is to create content. And it's really easy, even when you know that intellectually, when you're spending a lot of time on social media, or even if you're not, it's just easy to kind of like forget that and think that we need to compare ourselves to influencers who are putting out all this content, but they monetize in a completely different way. And therefore they have to conduct themselves in a different way. And it's not about throwing influencers under the bus. Like I think it's a legitimate like career. A lot of people don't, but I think it is. But it's just not what we are. And if we're trying to be influencers, but we're also trying to reserve time for our clients, which should be our highest priority on our, and then also reserve time for ourselves and our families so that we can be the best, friends and spouses and partners and, parents and whatever we want to be, but also have time to fill our cups so that we can fill others. It's like there's just no time for all of it. And really, if you take the influencer piece out and that was pretty cool. Did you see what happened with my hand and the
I
camera?
know.
Okay, yeah. If you if you take that piece out, then all of a sudden it becomes possible to create that schedule that you need. But if you think that you need to also have this second full-time job of creating content, it's not like it's just a straight, path to complete burnout. So, and like I said, sometimes people are new to this idea and they're like, oh my God, she's right. I'm trying to be an influencer and create all this content in all the places, but I'm also trying to run a business that is my full-time business because my full-time business is being with clients and also taking care of myself. So I have the time to do the deep thinking and the work so that I can show up for my clients. And then sometimes I'm talking to people who already know what I'm saying. They're like, yeah, I know I'm not an influencer, but we still somehow have ourselves on some level fooled into thinking we have to be, acting like an influencer. And I don't mean doing the things like the dancing and the whatever. I'm talking about the spending all the time on all the content. So that's all I'll say
Yeah.
about that.
Well, I mean, I just want to underscore that because it's such an important point, we're not influencers, we're service providers. And then there's this kind of people that are sort of in the Venn diagram, in our space who are, I call them coach influencers, right? But I think if you try to follow what they're doing, you need to understand what that business model is and just consciously, so make a conscious decision. Do I want to be an influencer? Do I want to be a coach influencer? Do I want to be a service provider? How do I want to spend my time and energy? Because I love that you say there's nothing wrong with any of it, but I think people get frustrated when somebody who's a coach influencer says do it this way, and you find it so difficult to do. Oh, there was one other point I wanted to make about, it'll come back to me. But yeah, I just think that is a super important point to make.
Yeah.
Okay, so moving into, what do we do about all of this? Like we've sort of laid out the problem. I think there's a lot of resonance with that. And then that's been the place where I felt like I didn't have really solid answers to, like Terry's question, like what are the alternatives to the meta properties? How do we, and I think the bigger question beyond that is sort of how do we conceptualize our ecosystem, our marketing ecosystem, and how do we understand the pieces that need to be there and what they're doing? Because I think when you start to understand that, and it doesn't just feel like these random bits that you're not sure how they tie together, that's when I remembered what I was going to say. That's when the how gets easier because you
Mhm.
understand actually what you're doing. Oh, crap, it left my head again. It'll come back. Okay. I'm going to kick it back
Yeah,
to you.
actually, I'm so glad you said that because I had just unmuted to basically say, like, I just said that, sometimes we know we're not influencers, sometimes we still are sort of thinking we are. But that that switch that you flip or whatever, it impacts a lot of different decisions that you make in your business all the time and in your marketing. And so this is a great example of that. So to answer your question, I think there are a lot of ways that we can do what you just described. The way I teach personally to build that content ecosystem, marketing ecosystem really, is to create 12 to 20, you get to choose kind of where in that range, pieces of long form content. And that's either blog posts, podcast episodes, YouTube videos, long form content. It can even be live streams, but I kind of think of those three. And most of my students end up choosing a blog, but the other ones work as well. And creating these, high quality pieces of content that hit upon these certain marks. And I teach like a 9 content pillar system. And then using that as the foundation and the basis for all your other marketing. So some people are probably hearing repurposing, and that's definitely part of it, but it's not just about repurposing. It's about like nailing those messages, those 12, the 9, what I call 9 pillars, but 12 different messages, and then like recycling through those and repeating them. And one thing I was saying the other day, and I think this is part of the solution, and this also relates back to this influencer conversation, is like, if you're an influencer, then you have to always be racking your brain to come up with like the newest thing to talk about. and what's trending right now. And so that I can like jump on a trend and like news jacket and get, something to go viral because that's what my brand partners want to see is me, going viral and having all these conversations with people in my DMs, I mean, in my comments or whatever. But if you're not an influencer, if you're a coach, let's say, theoretically, your goal isn't what that person's goal is. Your goal is to get clients. So the way I think about it is like, and this is again, this is just my way. There are other ways you can do this that are different than mine, but also not the influencer model. Is, you create this content, you cycle through it, and what that ends up meaning is that you're repeating yourself a lot. And influencers don't really repeat themselves. Like they don't have the need to keep like saying the same things over and over and over to get it through to people or to say something in like 10 different ways over the course of, you know, 14 days in their content so that it hits people the right way, depending on, where they are and what they need to hear for that concept to hit. They're not there to educate. They're not there really to like bring people into this content ecosystem that's going to convert them to clients. They're there to do the trending things and get the views and the likes. And I know it's not that simple, like I get it, but that's kind of like the contrast that I see. So I think if we remember that, again, I won't keep harping on this, but that we're not influencers, and we go back to this idea that, okay, you create these 9 or 12 or 20, it's kind of, there's some context there that I can explain if anyone wants to know, but pieces of content. And then what you do is they're long form, so they're rich and you can repurpose them and slice and dice them all these different ways. And not only repurpose them, but keep resharing them over and over again as well. What happens is you naturally end up repeating yourself a lot. And some people are afraid of repeating themselves. And I think we become afraid of repeating ourselves because we see the influencers not doing that. It's like they always have to come up with like the next greatest thing. But actually, that's not what we need to do. We need to repeat ourselves. And repetition in our content is actually what's missing for most people who don't make sales. For people who aren't making as many sales as they want to, when I look at those situations, I almost always notice after I look for a little bit that it comes down to the fact that they're not repeating their main messages over and over again enough, because that's actually what creates that trust and gets people helps you become known for the thing that you're known for and gets those messages through to your people. It takes so many times for people to hear your message to really understand it or have it hit the right way. So that's what we need to be doing. And again, that's another way where I think we are different from, our sisters over in the influencer or coach influencer world too. And I like the term coach influencer a lot, Bridget, but I also think that like if your main goal is to work with one-on-one clients, or even like if you have a group program, but it's not like you're not like, trying to get 200 people in your group program at once, like you're happy with 10 or 12 or 20. That's where I don't think we need to even be coach influencers until we get to the point where we have to communicate at such a large scale. And usually that means a low ticket offer. Like if you have a course that's like under $500, you may have to foray into that coach influencer world where you're a little bit in the middle of that Venn diagram. But if your main goal is to sign more one-to-one clients, I think we should squarely stay out of the coach influencer side of the Venn diagram. That's just my opinion. So.
Yeah, I think that you're making some great distinctions here that I can see are really landing for people. And then the other thing, another piece I think to unpack here is this whole idea about showing up consistently, which to me is also related to the idea of discoverability versus visibility. And so I would, discoverability, visibility, you could define them either way. So how I would define them is discoverability is putting yourself in places where people can find you asynchronously in time, right? So you put something on YouTube, somebody comes 3-6 months later, watches your video, it's there. You have a blog, somebody's searching for my relationship with my mom is screwed up. What do I do? And there you are with your blog post. Versus visibility, again, which I would define in the social media sphere, which is this visible content is ephemeral. I posted this morning on Facebook, Facebook went down today. Like, nobody's going to see that 2 days from now. And so that's the difference. And And the other thing I want to say about that is, I'm not talking about, I mean, some people may want to go off social media, and I think that's possible. It just requires a different strategy. But more what I'm talking about is I think social media has become the tail wagging the dog. And what we're talking about here is putting it back in the tail. And so, focusing your energy, focusing on discoverability. God, I finally remembered what I was going to say, because the other thing I think happens to people, I might be projecting because I've done this, is when we don't understand or haven't experienced an effective content strategy that nourishes us and sustains our business over time and brings people in, you get into doing this thing that I call offer flinging. And so you get into the sales cycle. Oh, I see nodding, right? It's like, let me do this offer, and let me do this offer, and let me do this offer. But that's actually, and you might get a few people and you get some money in the door and you get kind of in this cycle of needing to do that. And I totally get that. And sometimes you got to walk that line. But what we're talking about here is leaning into a discoverable content strategy. And, whether you do Jana's or, whatever you do, but just thinking about discoverability versus being so focused on visibility, because that is what's going to, fill up your funnel with folks over time. So you don't have to keep flinging offers and kind of doing all the dances that we do to get business. So yeah, so and then showing up consistently within that, I think, has been a place where people have also felt a lot of pressure to post every day or do these things, and that's not necessarily what's required. So Jana, I'd love to hear your thoughts on any of that.
Yeah, I agree with you. I honestly think that consistency is really overrated. And I think when you hear people kind of hammering on consistency, they're really thinking about that visibility as opposed to the discoverability. Because when you focus on long form content, and that's really what I, believe and have done for myself and my clients for the last 7, 8, I guess going on 8 years now. So that's just me. I mean, I am a little bit biased. I think long form content just has all these, it opens all the doors basically. But when you focus on long form content, it's not so much about consistency, because discoverability can happen when you're not actually showing up consistently. That's kind of the whole point. And I allow for the idea that a lot of people want to do both. Like, you want to be discoverable. And then also, once you have that discoverability kind of foundation, that infrastructure built, going and being visible with that foundational infrastructure is great. Like, go out and be visible, share your content. But the problem, I think, is like what you're saying, Bridget, is a lot of people put that tail before the dog or the cart before the horse or whatever, and get out there and get super visible, but they don't have a real content strategy, which is, really important. And then B, if you don't have that discoverability, like I said, infrastructure or scaffolding, if you want, in place first, that visibility ends up being not as efficient as it could be, because you're just kind of showing up, and like you said, your content's getting lost in a fast moving news feed, and you're just always having to feed the monster. So I like to think of, like, I love social media. Like, I love going on there, and I love writing to my email list, but all those things roll out from my, my long form content strategy, because that's the only way to me that any of this feels possible or sustainable. And also, like I said, that sets you up to repeat your messages, which is absolutely 100% what's needed in order to make sales. And absolutely 100% in my book, the number one reason people don't make enough sales or don't get enough clients is because they're not willing on some level, whether it's mindset wise or practically, to repeat themselves over and over and over and over again.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Well, and what I wrote about this morning on Facebook that, who knows if anybody saw it, but, I think newer coaches, so a lot of coaches come to me and they have a fear of putting themselves out there. And whether you're a newer coach, whether you've been around for a while, it has a little bit of a different flavor, but it comes up. And when I unpack it, I think a solid chunk of that is actually, I don't know what to put out there. I don't know. So for newer coaches, it's literally like, I don't know. And then of course there's some fear of vulnerability and all of that stuff, but it all gets kind of conflated and smushed together. And so it's hard so teasing that out helps a lot. And then I think for coaches that have been around a while, especially if you were doing things one way, like so many of us were, and having some success with it, and then all of a sudden the game has changed underneath you, then that brings up this fear of like, I don't know what to put out there. I don't know what to do. The stuff isn't working anymore. And so I just wanted to call that out because it's not always that you're scared of putting yourself out there. It's this lack of a coherent
Yes.
strategy. And I think if
Right.
you have a strategy, whether you're a new coach, whether you've been around for a while, you can always develop a strategy and that's going to help you move forward. And the other thing is, I think people can be allergic to strategy and frameworks. And of course, there's manipulative BS out there. But what I want everybody to think about it in terms of is like creativity always works better when it has constraints, right? So if you're doing a painting, what do you do it on? You do it on a canvas that's only so big, and you have to create, you have your type of paint that you're using, and you have your subject. You're creating constraints for yourself, and that allows you to be creative. If everything's just infinitely possible, you can't harness that energy. There's too many options. And so I want you to think about a framework in terms of like it's literally the container that allows you to be creative, that gives you that sort of focus and drive that will allow you to move forward and also gain information. You can decide, this feels right for me, this doesn't feel right for me, this is
Right.
effective, I like this, I don't like that.
Yep.
Yeah.
I actually was literally just talking to a student this morning who was saying, she was asking me some questions, and my answer for her to her question, what she was like, should I do it this way or this way? And I'm like, well, this is the way I teach you to do it in the system, right? System. It sounds like I'm being so like high level. This is my high leverage content system. She's a student in the course. This is what I teach you to do. However, and as I started to say to her, and she's this brilliant woman, right? As I started to say to her, like, that's not to say it's the only way to do it. There's some flexibility. She goes, I'm going to stop you right there. She says, until I get confident at doing this, I'm just going to follow this. And it was so smart of her to say that, because it's not like she doesn't realize there are other ways to do it. But you're right. She's recognizing that if she starts thinking about all these other ways to do it, all these other canvases she could paint on or whatever, she'll never, get this one, done. So yeah, that's a really good way to say it. And then there was something I wanted to respond to that you said earlier about, oh, I know you were saying that, it's not, I think it's true. It's like you hear people say like, oh, some coaches who don't make sales, they're afraid to show up. They're afraid to put themselves out there. And yes, there are some people that do fear that for sure. But I think there's so many more people who just are afraid that the juice won't be worth the squeeze. Like
Mm.
I think that's the bigger mindset hurdle for a lot of people. It's like, I don't mind getting out there and sharing what I know. Like, I know what I know is amazing and, could really help people. But if I spend all my time doing this, is it gonna work for me? And that's comes back to what you were saying earlier, Bridget, about how it feels like there's so much guesswork and spaghetti throwing at the wall. And when you feel like there's all this guesswork and the spaghetti, that's where it starts to feel like, is this even gonna, like, why should I time block, half a day once a week to create content if I don't even know the juice is going to be worth the squeeze? So
Yeah.
I agree with you on that.
Yeah, people are coming by their fear honestly, because that's kind of a mind fuck. And it's like, yes, you're right. So let's undo that.
Totally.
So Jana, I want to respect your IP and that people can learn in more detail through your course about your system. But is there a way you can hum a few bars for us, or kind of give us an example of, if we're going to change our approach, like what that might look like?
Yeah, I mean, one thing like that I talk about a lot that's really easy to it can help with like a little shift is the way I teach things is there's like multiple types of content pillars, and there's like outlines for each pillar. So that's the canvas, right? And one thing that I often remind people of is that, like, so my pillars basically fall into two categories. There's the expertise category, and that has multiple pillars under it. And then there's the conversion category, and that has multiple pillars under it. And I think a lot of times I see it's about like a 70-30 rule, I think for me, like 70% of people, when they're creating their content without a plan, they're really spending a lot of time creating content in the expertise bucket. So that's like talking about what problems people have and helping them solve those problems. and teaching people things that they didn't know before that are relevant, that are going to help them to, move forward toward this goal that that they want, that you actually help solve with your larger framework or your larger offers, right? But then they neglect the whole conversion side of things. And on the conversion side, you have the things that people like need to hear to like connect with you, things like why you created this offer to begin with, things like result stories, which I always say, like, you don't need to have a slew of client results to start creating content that converts, because it's only one way to do it. But it is good as you're developing these success stories with people you've worked with to incorporate that into your content, right? So that's going to be what I consider one of the pillars, but only one of them. So I would just say, like, I think like 70% of people are spending a lot of time in this expert zone and sharing what they know. And a lot of people are like, wow, she's really smart. But at the end of the day, that's not moving the needle, because people don't hire you just because you're smart. They hire you because they think you can, solve a problem for them. And then the other side of it, I feel like the other like 30% of people make the mistake of spending way too much time talking about the things in the conversion category, like your framework and your offers and, countering an objection and things like that. And they don't spend enough time in the expertise category, really feeling into like what the problems feel like for their ideal audience. And usually it's because we don't spend enough time like putting ourselves in their shoes. So I mean, it's kind of like a taste of the way I do it. And again, like, I didn't necessarily come here to say like, oh, this is the way I do it, this is the only way to do it. I just wanted to say, like, that's an example of the kind of solution that you can put into play to make so that you have this like scaffolding of what you're calling, Bridget, what was the not visibility, the discoverability piece. Then you can build the visibility on it if you want to, right? So this is one way to do it. This is not the only way. But with my way, if you do it my way, you're creating, these 9 pieces of content. Some of them are expertise, some of them are conversion, and you need both. And a lot of people are in a comfort zone in one side or the other, talking a lot about their offers, but not really backing it up. And then with like the expertise content, and then more often than not, people are more like spending a lot of time in their comfort zone of the expertise content, but not doing the conversion stuff to actually move people from thinking, oh, wow, she's so smart, over to the, wow, she can solve my problem, I'm going to hire her side of
Yeah.
the journey. So I don't know if there's anyone here who feels like, do you feel like you fall into one of those categories, like the 70% of people who talk a lot about their expertise, but don't really get into the conversion content, versus the 30% of people who are always talking about their offers, but it's like, but where's all the value content that's like showing me that you really know how to help me inside those offers, kind of thing. It's like, those are the two big, I don't know, like buckets, I guess, that I see people falling into. And the point is you need both to
Yeah.
convert people. Yeah.
Yeah. Thank you for that. I
Sure.
appreciate it. There was one. Oh, so before we go into Q&A, because I feel like this is a really important piece, can you say a little bit about why blogs? Because to me, this is like everything old is new again. And I realized, like, actually when I came onto the scene in 2008, it was actually, I think it was the beginning of post blog. So we were moving into the social media era. So
Mm.
I've been really thinking about this, like, oh, I responded, like, I hired my coach who was a blogger, but I did not learn that technique. So the way that I came up, blogs were more like the place where it was just, you share your posts and you share what you're thinking, not not as much this intentional tool. And so if you can talk about
Yeah.
the blog as this more intentional selling
Hmm.
tool.
Yeah. And it's so interesting too, because my mind, while you're asking this question, is going back to the influencer thing again, because another, thing that I think gets in people's way is like, I'm here to tell you long form content converts faster and more effectively than short form content. And I could get into why. I just wrote a whole email to my list all about why. And if I went through it all, you'd believe me. And by the end of it, you'd be like, yeah, she's absolutely right. I guarantee you. That being said, a lot of people tend to shy away from creating long form content in the form of a blog, because like 99% of the advice that we see out there for writing a blog is not for us. It's not for coaches. It's for bloggers. So when you said your coach was a blogger, I was wondering, was she a coach with a blog, or was she a blogger? Because there's bloggers out there who, you know, who that again, blogging is their full-time job and they have to worry about SEO and they have to worry about, and the way I teach things, we don't worry too much about SEO. Like the content ends up innately being SEO friendly, but we don't constrain ourselves with worrying about writing around keywords and that kind of thing. But, you know, they have to worry about fancy formatting and jump links and, you know, blog categories and lots of graphics and all that kind of stuff because they're monetizing on traffic. And that's not how we monetize. We monetize our blog. We're not a blogger, we're a coach with a blog, right? We monetize by having the content in that blog communicate the things to people that they need to learn and understand more deeply and hear in order to be ready to hire us. So if you structure your blog so it has all that, people can literally binge on it. And you know, you mentioned earlier, Bridget, someone can search for something and find you, and that's true. But the other thing is that when people are considering hiring a coach, they want to go somewhere and be able to like see everything. They want to be able to see all those things, whether they know it or not. They're kind of unconsciously scanning for those things that they need to understand more deeply here and learn to be ready to hire you. So if you can think about your blog as a place where you're communicating all those things as opposed to just a place where you're sharing your day-to-day thoughts, that's where you're going to start seeing a blog actually be like a system that that converts your audience to clients. So you're right. When we think about blogs, we think about, you know, oh, I'm going to get on today and I'm going to share what I'm doing. And there might be a little life lesson somewhere in there as well, because that's how I think. I think in life lessons. And so I'm going to share that. But that's, yeah, that's not the kind of blog. I mean, you can do that for fun in addition to a strategic conversion friendly blog, but that's not a conversion friendly blog. A conversion friendly blog is the thing that addresses those things that people need to be ready to hire you.
So thank you for that. And we're getting some questions in the chat. So yeah, we're talking about it's short form content versus long form content. So short form content are like social media posts, basically. Let's just call it that. This long form content that we're talking about lives on your blog. It can be YouTube videos. So it's literally
discoverable.
It's discoverable. I think you say it's like 500 words or more, just to give you a sense of the length. It's a podcast episode. It's a YouTube video that's, you know, more than a couple minutes long. So any one of these things can be, but we're talking about content that is longer that allows you to unpack these ideas that Jan has been talking about, right? So you're unpacking your expertise, you're unpacking why, you know, what you have to offer and why that's going to help somebody and who else it's helped. So there's a lot of notes that you can hit, but so the orientation shifts to your potential client versus you. So the way that I like to think about it is, you know, and I do this, like, there's nothing wrong, but like, oh, I had this experience, like you're talking about the life lesson blog. I would say my blog is probably 100% that right now, because I have not started down this path yet. So it's a lot of stories about me and experiences I've had with my clients and stuff. And that's all good raw material. But the way that I'm seeing this longer form content is the orientation is to the client. And what I mean by that is it's like, what do they need to know about their issues, their problems in their words? So reaching out from where I am to connect with them and say, hey, I understand what's going on with you. And then bringing them through a process through words on the page or videos or whatever of helping them understand that I can help them with certain problems and inviting them into my world, whether it's join my email list, try this free download, watch this video. You also want to kind of pepper in these little invitations along the way. And then even at the bottom, you can share an offering that you have that's relevant to this post. You can also then, you want to point them toward more relevant content in the blog, like keep going. And if you go to Jana's site, which we'll send that around, but if you go, you can see what she's doing there. You can see examples of this. So that's another good way to just kind of look and get a sense of like, what does this look like, and start to think about how this might change what you do. And then you're taking pieces of that And that's what goes out in your social media and all that stuff. So I just wanted to make that really clear for folks.
Yeah, earlier I was wondering if you were going to ask me about my thread strategy. And so I just wrote down a note about threads because I'm doing pretty well over there. I know that's how you
Yeah,
found me.
I
Yeah.
would personally love to hear
Yeah.
that.
Well, I wrote down, 80 to 85% of what I'm writing on threads is either something I'm repeating that I already said, whether it was in those same words or different words, or it's repurposed directly from my blog. I mean, it's like at least 80 to 85%. And this is on a platform where we have this like unhinged kind of thing. I mean, I am sort of peppering in random stuff because that's what the platform requires, but most of my stuff is just repeating my main messages.
Yeah, and it works. So it's been interesting to watch and it feels refreshing. That's the other thing. I'm not watching what Jana's doing and going like, oh, that's salesy. It's refreshing. I, I feel she's speaking clearly with her voice. I have a sense of her that's matching like being in her presence. So that's the other piece of this. There are inner and outer work components. So it's never about being something that you're not. It's always about expressing who you are and how you help. Okay, so let's get to a few questions and any reflections. And Wendy wrote in here, I have a question around creating my content strategy in two distinct ways. One, I'm a consultant and plan on creating operations how-tos tutorial content that I'd sell to clients. The biggest driver for me is I had a spiritual awakening in 2023 that was life-changing. I want to honor how I release and market that content. Very different than number one. Not sure where to start around either of these. I'm also introverted and don't love being in the spotlight. Couple ideas here. One, if you're introverted and you don't love being in the spotlight, so like the pure coach in me would say, well, and this is also true, that'll be something to work through over time. But you also may want to present yourself as more like an agency or a consultancy. And so it's not that you're hiding behind the business, but you're speaking through the business rather than, so you depersonalize it a little bit. And that's great. Like there's nothing wrong with that. And I think it can really help because then you don't have to worry. It's just not so personal and you know a lot about the business. And I think when you ground yourself in that orientation, it can sort of help you with these other pieces too of just, there's a lot to point number one, creating the how-to tutorial content and how to sell it to clients. And so that's a learning curve. Right here is the beginning of that. But I guess just to kind of get you started, you want to think about a content strategy that's like you're giving people enough information to get their attention and bring them into your world. And then there's a point where you install some kind of paywall, whether it's downloads, whether it's a product, whether it's working with you. And so you just have to kind of decide over time, like where that line is. And also, working with somebody or finding a place to dive in and just learn more because it sounds like you're at the beginning of the process. And then, yeah, because you've had this awakening, it's what I'm reading in here is that you want to do this in a way that's aligned and ethical for you. And so just knowing you that in your background, like that may mean some unlearning of some things that I think most all of us have some unlearning of some things. And so just be open to letting things go. Try not to throw everything out. I think I've definitely been over dramatic at different times and like thrown out too much stuff. And then it's like, okay, let me bring it back in. Because ultimately, we are the arbiters. Strategies and tactics are strategies and tactics. When we do them, like when our desire, our connection to ourselves, our authenticity, our ethics, that's the filter through which all this is going to go through. And so it's also just cultivating that and trusting yourself. Jen, I don't know if you had anything to add to that.
Yeah, I feel like we're a good pair here, Bridget, because I always think about the strategy side of things as far as like my mind goes right past any mindset stuff, which is why I have to have a mindset coach myself at all times. Um, so I was wondering, based on reading over your question, Wendy, whether we're talking about one business or two different businesses. If you're talking about you're
Mm.
going to be offering the tutorials, it sounds like. And is there going to be a separate business where you're also talking about the more spiritual things, or are you finding an intersection of those two things in one business? And I actually think that could be, like very interesting and help you differentiate yourself from other people as well. So I was just wondering which one of those is actually going on in this circumstance.
That's a really good question. I thought about it. So it was such a game changing, like changed my DNA, this experience. I just want to honor it. I feel calling to get it out there. So there's like a personal, I need to get this content out there to help people. And I don't honestly care if I even make money on that part. And then this is useful for business too. It's on finding your self-worth and feeling you're good enough and like
Mhm.
it's really good stuff that changes your whole life after you experience it. And I'm an engineer, so I have step by step. I'm like more of the expertise, but I'm going to try to create practices to help people actually obtain it in their own life. And so there's the spiritual or the personal side, but like leaders need this,
Yeah.
And so
So
I
it,
think there's a business aspect of it too.
yeah, yeah. And I think that me asking the question, you may not have exactly the answer right now, but just knowing that that's a question that you need to answer for yourself is, probably
Okay,
the value of this conversation.
awesome.
Because I wasn't sure. So you need to,
Okay.
to figure that part out. Yeah.
And that's what the early stages are about. I think people, so Wendy, in parlance that I use that you'll recognize, people try to scale too quickly and they flame out. And so there's a part of when you're new, it creating this space where you can sort of live, like Rilke says, you can live the questions. So these are questions that you need to kind of live into. And the way that you do that is by experimenting. So your content strategy at the beginning may be a lot more exploratory and not so much falling into these definitions that we're talking about yet. Like it's good to hold all of that in your awareness, but you need a space to just explore. Like, what do I have to say? Who am I in this and who is this for? And the way to, it's hard to just sit in your head and answer those questions. So, and there might be like some beta work with clients or people just to, and being an engineer, I think it's always so awesome when engineers get involved in the personal development space because you're going to get something that's like really structured and holds together in a really nice way. So yeah, so part of it too is like, I think in our culture especially, we don't let ourselves be early days as much with stuff. It's like we want to be experts right away, we want to scale, and it's like, well, the path to do that is, people don't like to hear it, but it takes time. And so just being in that exploration, and like Jana was saying, these are really good questions for you to unpack. All right, who else? I mean, we just ended up talking a whole lot. Anybody else have questions or something they want to toss into the mix? I definitely want to give Jana a moment here to talk about, you've been talking about your offerings, but I want you to have this space to kind of take the mic and invite people into your world.
Sure. I mean, the place I always invite people into is my email list. Well, right now I'm actually I have a wait list going for my next opening of high leverage content. So right now there's a good number of emails going out, but normally I'm sending emails a few times a week. And I dive pretty deep into like problem solving. I see my emails as like problem solving emails that give a lot of value, whether or not people decide, to buy or not. So, oh, thanks, Bridget. So yeah, I would say if you are interested in just kind of like learning more about the way I think of content and the way I think about differentiating ourselves from influencers and bloggers, and the way I think about repurposing and structuring businesses and all those kinds of things, eliminating the guesswork or reducing the guesswork from content. I'd love to have you join my email community. And Bridget dropped the link there. It's just janaomedia.com/emails. And yeah, we talked a little bit about Threads. Bridget and I are both over on Threads doing stuff. So I don't know if anybody wants to hang out over there. It's down right now, right?
Yeah.
But once it comes back up, come on over, and that can give you a little bit of kind of a sampling or taste of some of the way that I think about content strategy and sales and the coaching business too. So those would be a couple
Yeah.
places to find me.
Yeah, awesome. I'm so glad you joined us, Jana. And I just wanted to also toss into the mix. I have a little business road mapping offering that I do. It's one 90-minute session, and I send you, when you sign up, I send you out a comprehensive pre-work document. Then I have a big think on your business, and then we sit for 90 seconds. I turn on the recording and we go. And there's several of you that have worked with me before, and I think you can all attest that my sessions are dense. Like, we get through a lot happens. And so this is really about road mapping your way forward for the next 3, 6 months, even a year, so that you can have this kind of clarity that we're talking about. And it doesn't matter if you're the one that provides clarity for all of your clients. It's like Jana says, she needs a mindset coach. We need that person that's doing that for us. And so I'll put that offer when I send around the replay. That'll be in there. It's a great way to just kind of do a quick hit, but an effective hit if you're not feeling like you want to invest in a bigger coaching relationship right now. And then, yeah, definitely check out Jana's stuff. And I just really appreciate you all coming to this conversation. Yeah, follow us on the socials. Yeah, thank you so much. And Jana, thank you for coming. This was
Thanks.
really amazing. I love this conversation. Yeah.
Yeah, I like this format. This is fun, Bridget.
Yeah, I'm really enjoying doing these. So, yeah. All right, everyone. Thanks again. We'll see you soon. All right. Take care. Bye.